And then I'll um, set Tom the link in case, because we sometimes still have the weird not thing the right. So just something light and non-controversial while we get started. How do you feel about the Iran war?
Not good.
I imagine you're not a fan of either side of either of the participants, or do you have some sympathy for the Iranian regime?
Well, a nation has the right to defend itself against illegal attacks. Um, they did not have nukes. They were not bothering anybody.
They
Is
define not
Israel?
bothering
Yeah,
anybody. So I mean, let's you know, Trump is Trump. He's doing this for reasons of ego and whatever, and doesn't care about international law or destroying the American alliance fabric. Not Trump is not the hero here. Um, the Iranian regime, last I checked, has been actively funding terrorist groups that don't just, they may say they target Israel, but they kill lots of other people along the way. They actively. So you could say that they are doing good things, that they're supporting the Palestinians in Gaza, they're supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, but you can't say that they're doing nothing.
nothing
And
against the U.S.
okay, so fair to say that the U.S. should not care about any of this, but to say that they're not doing anything to anybody, like they're doing lots of stuff in the Middle East, and frankly, from my perspective, they've been doing some pretty horrific things to their own people. And so, even if Trump is not in any way in the right on this, the Westphalian argument, no, uh, the government of Iran, regardless of whether it's legitimate or not, is the government, and they have the right to do to their population whatever they want, and nobody should ever interfere with that, is not a position I'm willing to take. I'm curious if you
That
are.
no, but the way that we address those things matters. The
Sure.
way that the United States got dog walked into attacking Iran by Israel matters.
So let's slow
Israel,
down. Let's slow down. Okay. Um, the thing that I believe, and how we got there is regardless, is that Trump bizarrely, like this was the most surreal thing that happened, is that while the Iranians were protesting their government and the Minnesotans were protesting our government, Trump decided to side with the Iranian protesters rather than the Minnesota protesters, which was an insane thing to do, although I guess it was on brand for him being insane. Um, but from my perspective, that's what, when he made that public line in the sand, Iranian protesters, help is on the way. That's how he got himself sucked into this for reasons of ego.
he did the same thing to Venezuela. Did the
But
exact
he
said the
never,
same
he
words.
never, he no. Venezuela
He
was, it
didn't
was like
say
he said it was all about the oil, right? He was worried about American oil companies that were expropriated. He never publicly aligned himself with the Venezuelan people.
he did. I thought he did. Well, maybe I could be wrong,
No,
but
he asked for the peace prize afterwards. But and like here's the thing, it was a bizarre, irrational, ego-driven thing. On the other hand, like let's assume it was a cynical, calculated ploy. I still agree with him that what is happening to the Iranian people is horrible, and if we had a Jimmy Carter, someone who I thought was actually moral and motivated by conscience, and he had said that, and he tried to do something in a internationally responsible way to say, like, no, this is essentially self-genocide of your people. This is not something that we should stand for. We need to do something militarily. That would have been something I could have supported.
Well,
You
the
guys are not
Uyghurs,
the theoretical role of a United Nations, which in Security Council without vetoes decides that it is in international law to help a nation like that.
Yeah, and this is the
Unfortunately, it doesn't work, but
well, yeah, and this is the ugly truth that I think is actually on brand for this group here, and I have some thoughts about how to resolve it. But let's just admit that in an ideal world, none of this would be happening. In the real world we're in now, as much as I can easily imagine this going horribly wrong, and even worse, I can imagine it possibly working and Trump getting the credit, which is even more horrific to imagine. The things that have been happening in Iran and in the Middle East, because everyone's hiding behind the fig leaf of Westphalian sovereignty, feels worse.
well, and we can even go back to why do we have the Khomeini in Iran? Because the U.S. Took out a democratically elected leader because they
Sorry,
didn't
the
like
Shah. Well, sorry, slow
yeah.
down. They. You're right. They did. You're right. Right. Yes, and this is the. So let's. Okay, good. That is true. Are you willing to go one step further back?
To where?
So this is the fascinating bit of history connecting Iran and Venezuela, which is the. And I'm not justifying anything. I'm trying to understand the causality here and see if you guys, because this is leading to something I want to talk about, which is that the before the oil boom, most of the countries outside of the West were poor because they had no resources, they had no economic thing. And then people discover oil and they don't have any technology, they don't have any money. So American oil companies said, hey, we will go ahead and invest billions of dollars in building out your oil industry. And in exchange, we expect a share of the profits. And on the one hand, America's doing this from a position of strength, and they cut a deal that's very favorable to American interests. On the other hand, if they didn't do this, if they say, okay, no deal, then all these people stay stuck and poor and have no oil and no money. And so America did this for Venezuela and for Iran and a bunch of places. And then governments came to power that looked and said, hey, this deal sucks. We're just going to nationalize all the oil and you guys don't get a penny. And America throws hissy fits. And they supported the Shah in Iran. They, put Delcy. And so it's like, okay, that's stupid. Never mind evil. That's just stupid of America to play that game because it's always going to blow up in your face. It blew up horribly in Iran. And it's also immoral. But the interesting question is, what's the alternative? Should the US just have never given these people any money? Should they have just given it away for free out of the goodness of their heart? Because the ugly truth is that there is no international court that can say, oh, I'm sorry, let's arbitrate this and we can renegotiate it so that it's 12% rather than 20%. That's where this all broke down. And so, it's the interesting thing, and this is actually, I think, the main topic I wanted to discuss, unless you guys said something else, is why have we not had a system like this in the past? And what could we imagine changing based on everything we've learned and studied and has happened over the last couple of years of datocracy that could actually be strong enough to prevent the need for this from happening? Because I actually prefer a world where the United States shares its wealth with other countries and occasionally gets screwed and occasionally gets ticked off about it, to a world where the United States says, okay, we will never let any other country become rich because we don't want this to happen.
Well, we have to look at least when it comes to the planet, resources as world resources. Like, so let's say Iran didn't, had all this oil, it didn't have the technology to excavate it. So, and this is hindsight, right? Then he says, oh, hey, you countries that have the technology, let's come work together. This is our country, this is our resources, but you can help us to get it out and process it,
And then we
whatever.
will keep it all for ourselves. And that's the deal.
Well, we can sell it, but
But they get to keep
you're going to
all
be
the money,
consultants.
all the right.
Yeah.
Is that you give so we give you billions of dollars, and then we have to pay you for all the oil we get, and we get no return on our investment.
I said no. I said consultant. Consultants
Sorry,
get paid.
sorry, no consult. Sorry, but this is odd. This is the problem. Let me ask the. But here's the thing, right? Consultants do not put in billions of dollars of capital. That's the problem. If it's just a consultant, hey, we can talk to you all you want. We don't give you any money. We don't give you any equipment. You have to buy all the equipment up front.
They could, they could get loans. They could
From who?
From whoever smart bank or whatever country says,
Yes.
hey,
Yeah, hey,
have...
and Ernest, guess who gave them the loan?
Who? The US?
The United States. It's like, hey, we will give you all of these things on a loan contingent on you paying us back the loan with these rates and these cost structures so that we get our investment back. And then the government says, we don't like this loan anymore. We're just going to declare that loan, unfair bargaining. And, all the oil we said we were going to give you to pay back that loan, we're just going to keep it. This is what ticked Trump off. He explained it horribly.
Okay. Not Trump, because Bush did it.
Everybody does it because everybody does this on both sides. Everyone does this on both sides. It's happened forever. But it's the problem. It's like, if I give you money and you do something and then you don't pay, like it happens in California. If you rent to somebody and they decide, like this happened to my next door neighbor, is that the lady who used to live in this house rented the house next door, a little old retired lady, to a couple. And when that couple moved in, they said, okay, we've decided we're not leaving. And we know California a lot better than you do. You can't evict us. And so she had she owned the house. She got it spruced up. She built it up. They came in, they squatted, and then they just refused to pay her. And she couldn't do a thing about it. Is it once you have this? What?
She didn't evict him?
She couldn't, because the rules around the California law is you're a rich landlord. These are poor people who don't seem to have enough money. And so, the burden of proof is on her to say, like, no, this is really unfair. But it's like, possession is 9/10 of the law. And if you don't have the wherewithal to enforce your point of view, you lose. And it's easy to say, for a little old widowed lady, well, that's just wrong. She should be able to call the police and get some physical force to evict them. But it's the same dynamic. I mean, at what point do you say, this is the same moral dilemma, just at a different scale? Is if you build something, but then someone else takes possession of it, how do you make sure that they pay you back?
Well, at the level of nations, I don't know, we have world banks and we have international courts, and there should be systems that, to negotiate between nations. I mean, if there aren't, we're stupid. There should be a system where a nation says, we're a nation that doesn't have the technology needed to do this, whatever. Just like individuals, I don't have the money to buy this house, I can rent it. Uh, there should be some sort of civilized system of countries to be able to exploit the resources that they can't by themselves without letting you know
Without letting
letting
them
go of
exploit the
the
lenders.
software.
Right, but
Well,
here,
not
and this is the problem.
exploit, but if you don't pay, then there's a system to say you promised that you were gonna there should be a system to uh, financially or in other ways that are not bombing and killing people, making the nation that reneged pay.
Right. So let's back up then. Okay, let's think this through. Let's go with our example of of the former owner of this house. Is that at the end of the day, if that person has physical possession of that property, then at some point, either you have to blockade the house and starve them out, or you have to like have the police go physically in there and remove them.
Mhm.
Those are kind of the only two options for how she could get her house back. Is you either have to have physical containment or physical eviction. That's just the ugly reality of the physical world. So someone has to.
But she can't just go in and shoot her in the head and take her out. She has to use the courts. Some judge has to sign on this and then approve the police to do that. That's the right way to do it.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if you ever watch Westerns.
I used to.
But one of the things about the West is that like it's right at this liminal space between law and order and self-justice, because sometimes there is no sheriff around within 3 days ride. Sometimes the local sheriff is corrupt, right? And until you get federal marshals, there's no court of appeal. Even when there is, sometimes it's too late. And that's why you have all these epic gunfights and stuff. Is like, yes, in a world where those exist and they arrive quickly enough, it is immoral and irrational to take the law into your own hands. I completely agree. This is the ugly reality we live with. In a world where either there's no system of government, B, the system of government is deeply corrupt, or C, it just takes too long. It may still be immoral, but it is perfectly rational. And perhaps the only way to survive is to take the law into your own hands. Let me give you the counterfactual to show that it works both ways. Is that if the Iranian people and the Iranian government had a legitimate court of appeals to say, hey, we understand that this thing was created and that there is a stake here, but it was negotiated under duress. And we insist on a day in court where we have the opportunity to present all the evidence, have it seen and heard. The American corporation, the American government also have the ability to present all their evidence and have it be seen and heard. And then in some datocratic way that hire Tom as a consultant, and that the world court of opinion can weigh in and say, look, this is really what's going on. These are the real facts. This is what feels fair in terms of all the different things. And everyone looks and said, okay, I don't like that solution, but it's clear that any other solution is less fair and less popularly accessible. And then they say, okay, if the whole world agrees on this, we got to live with it. That would have solved the problem. And if we could do that in a way that didn't take 18 years, they probably would have, because that would have been less expensive than the revolution and the war and all the disaster. And that's the thing that we need to create, is a way for people to create global legitimacy around the real facts quickly. And if that happens, then we don't have, people acting like, the frontier mom who's convinced that the sheriff is either corrupt or too far away, so she shoots the squatters herself. That's the problem we have to solve. You buy that?
Yes, but yeah, that's a problem. But how can we solve it when there's people, we have all these movements, that wanna, and we have this conversation about culture and is my culture more important than the world, right? As long as
Or
we
as
have
opposed to, is my nation more important than this world? Is my values
yeah,
more
yeah,
important than the
yeah,
world?
yeah, like this is always a problem. Like people
Ah,
um wanna coalesce around their own culture and treat everything else as the enemy. And as long as
and
we do that, and we've been doing this for what, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years,
well,
um, there's always going to be strife. It's like we
oh,
need the strife to live. It's like
you
everybody
didn't
needs
read
to.
you did not read my blog post because I literally answered that question.
Oh,
So that's fine. I only sent out, but like literally, you're asking the question why we have this, right? And um, so I'd be happy to take five. Tom, you're being very patient. I want to at least give you a moment to interject anything or raise a different question before I dive into my diatribe.
Okay, I was writing up a remark in the chat, but I'll give you the beginning of it. We have not solved the problem at the USA level or the UN level of designing a governance that cannot be evaded by corrupt, dishonest, unethical politicians.
Yes.
Uh, so the mechanisms are there, but when Trump can just say, I'm not even going to bother to ask Congress, I'm just going to claim something and invade, then he's
mm,
evading the congressional privilege of declaring war. But he just, that's what he does. And again, at the international level, same problem. It doesn't matter what the veto countries can just veto things and we're all done. So
Yes. So your statement is almost correct.
thank you.
We have not solved the problem of implementing a governance that cannot be uh, uh, exploited by defectors.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
meant. That's what I meant.
that's what you meant, but that's not what you said.
Was I wasn't finished typing
Oh,
in before you gave me the word.
you did have the word designing in there before. Were you going to edit that? Do you want to revise your? I will allow you to revise your statement.
It's okay. I agree with you.
it's
Okay.
like several people in hundreds of years they go to this stuff. They say we need to change. They write the rules. The founding fathers said we don't need a king. We're gonna have to have this three co-equal government, whatever. They write the rules, but then there comes this idiot who says, "Oh, the rules don't apply to me," and he fucks up everything. People have seen this. They have seen the problem. They implemented a solution, but then there's uh, idiots who get support, popular support somehow, and then they get the wherewithal to just not follow the rules,
Right, like the
right?
founding fathers.
Yeah, Congress has the ability to, hey,
Sorry. But so, Ernest, you realize that the British Crown thought that's what the founding fathers were doing.
well, exact. Well,
Yes, it's like, hey, we have a system that works. It's called common law. It's called monarchy. And you angry, impetuous, arrogant Americans think that you can do better. I'm sorry. That is just out of bounds.
well, but of course, I guess we could say it's a matter of context.
But who gets to decide what's in bounds and out of bounds?
Well, who gets to decide? Obviously, there's several sectors who get to decide. The Americans, they get to decide. The
Why?
monarchy,
Well, we'll say
they
why. Sorry, the Americans didn't get to decide. The Constitutional Congress, which was maybe represented a third of America at the time, they decided we're screw the king. We're just going to say that this is a better way, and if you don't like it, we're going to shove a musket up your rear. That's literally, that's basically what happened, and they got away with it. I mean,
so
is that
we're
how we
at the.
decide? I mean, you
I
can't
guess
defend.
I guess
I'm
we're
being
at the
nasty.
whims of the most powerful people in each sector or area, whatever, that they, you know, I guess they get to decide because they are the most powerful,
Right,
right?
yeah, and that is the well. There's two halves of that. I'm being cruel, but I have a point to it, which is that, and this was my quibble with Tom's thing, is I believe I have designed a governance that can avoid being exploited by defection. I've not
Well,
implemented, I have not proved it, but that is what I have spent the last 24 hours designing.
I'd
And
like to hear it.
yes, so it's in the link. You can look at it. It's a really painfully long post that even I haven't read in its entirety. So,
I want the one-page summary.
okay, let's. Okay, I think we can do that. Give me a one-page summary. Waiting to do this in real time. Can you see this?
ResoModernity?
ResoModernity Cafe 15, Dunbar's Revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. I've enlarged it so I can read it.
Yeah, but let me talk about this. And this is the thing that, to answer your question, Ernest, why does everyone go back to tribalism? Right? Why does some idiot say, like, let's be, and the reason is it makes us feel human. If I don't have people who know me, who share my values, who value me for who I am, I lose my sense of self and I either withdraw into non-existence, be the suicide statistics, or I dissociate from reality to the point where I can analyze things brilliantly, but I have zero impact on the real world. Or I invent a fake tribe that I defend as viciously as as people defend their real tribes. That's the basic critique, is that to be human is to feel seen and valued. And most of us would literally rather die than lose that. And that's the only reason why we had the American revolutions. They say, you're not seeing us, King. We see ourselves more clearly, and we're going to force you to acknowledge that fact, even if it's violent. And that, okay, so that's what was that? That's our most friendly. And that back in the ice ages, when we all lived in small, bands and married our second cousins, which is not too different from the world my parents grew up in, that was thick culture. That was thick identity. And everything we've done since then has diluted that identity in the name of, because the problem with that is that everyone that you know that you're related to is fully human, and everyone else is literally unintelligible. You can't understand their language, you can't understand their values. You may have very brief interactive trading sessions or mating sessions or whatever under really special circumstances, but nothing is sustained. The next session could easily turn into a massacre rather than a trade, and you have no context and no consideration. That was what the world was like 100,000 years ago. And so we said, okay, this is bad. We shouldn't always be killing each other, randomly. Let's build some institutions. Let's build religions. Let's build nations. Let's build cities. Let's build empires to get everyone to agree to some sort of common law structure so that we don't just randomly kill each other. But the price of that is we thinned out what it meant to be human. That's the big claim. When recognition is diluted, we don't just lose others, we lose the conditions that make us real. that make us feel like real humans. This is what I call a rice empire, where we got to make sure that we all don't starve. So we have to manage the irrigation. So we're gonna, put an empire, allow an emperor to rule over us, like the Chinese. The Oriental empires are even more extreme than the Western and Middle Eastern versions, because it kept everyone fed and kept the barbarians from sacking all the grain. So the and so it worked at a heavy cost, and periodically the desire to remain human erupts in healthy and unhealthy ways, more or less successful. And kind of the more generative ones that actually succeed enough to win and then succeed enough to thrive are the ones we remember positively. I think was said, Tom, you might know this better than I do. There's only 2 revolutions in history that actually worked out about as well as you could expect. One was the American Revolution, and the other was Mark Antony, Augustus Caesar. That they had a good run of about 4 good emperors that actually improved on the situation beforehand in some meaningful metrics. Everything else has been kind of sucky in terms of a revolution. Initial foundings have often worked better, like Charlemagne's Europe, or even King Alfred's England did a pretty good job, but those weren't really revolutions. Those are mostly picking up the pieces and starting over from scratch. So anyway, the idea is that this is the problem to be solved, is that to be real, you have to be local. To be legible, you have to be abstract. And that's why we keep getting stuck. We create better abstractions, and then people get sick of them and want to become more real. Just like, and we have not found a way to marry the two. So this idea of Dunbar's number, you guys familiar with Dunbar's number? The idea that about 100, 150 people socially can understand and trust one another. I think that was your idea of asteroids and spaceships, is people just, can live in these self-contained communities and not have to worry about anybody else because you all know and trust each other for real.
Yeah, hopefully someday humanity will be able to emigrate to the asteroid belt, or the
Yeah,
many years later,
and I know
whatever.
this isn't a big deal for you, Ernest, but I personally am very glad I no longer live in a world where my only option is to marry my second cousin.
Okay.
So your mileage may vary, but that is definitely, and this was not actually a hypothetical question. I was right on the liminal edge where it was, just barely a possibility. And so, it's nice to live in a world where you can meet other people from different tribes and have some framework for engaging and coordinating on things bigger than what your tribe can do without having to be separated by light years. So that's the design challenge, right? Is you want to get the benefits of small, tight groups where you know each other and non-interference by those that are far away, and the without the cost of having everyone be unintelligible and impossible to coordinate. So anyway, let's just make this, forget the narrative, summarize the core argument, make this. Okay. Scale breaks human reality because of the trade-off between recognition and legibility. The existing system is rice empires, which thins out our humanity, and that makes it fragile under change. So the pivot is rice. This is the big idea. I don't think it's any different than what we said before, but maybe crisper. There's a system I call rice. You guys remember OODA, the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act loop? I'm sure you have a book on this, if not 2, right, Tom?
Yeah.
You familiar with the term, Ernest? Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's sometimes known as the fighter loop, right? As you observe, you observe.
Discussing it.
Yeah. So the idea is, that's always sort of like a single person at the top making decisions. It's about a single. That's not what it has to be, but that's how it's commonly used and implicitly implies. I just look around and observe my reality. I orient myself within it and make a decision, and then I act. Or, it's an executive team led by a president. And this is the big shift. What Rice is to say, okay, let's make that a distributed social process rather than having a king or an emperor or CEO, where we get, rather than me, is that we have a shared immutable reality. You have a permanent record of what actually happened in a way that is neutral to any possible interpretation or tampering. You have parallel interpretation. Anybody, human, AI, or otherwise, has a right to create their own interpretation grounded in that reality. And you can observe it and say, well, you make that interpretation, that is not consistent with this reality. You're ignoring these facts, you're misreading these facts, and I can show you a better way, and everyone else can see it. So that's the point. This is good. One, there's the shared, what are the key attributes each? Shared irreversible ground truth, distributed sense making. It's context rich, multiple perspectives. And then once you have that, if you have the relational, you no longer need relational bandwidth to make sense of everything. You can crowdsource it, you can do AIs, whatever, but you do the parallel sense making, and then you can go there and say, okay, now we can all look at a common ground truth, a diversity of perspectives. So going back to ran under the Shah, is the problem from this perspective is that the Shah was aligned with the international community. We need to accept America's version of reality, and the democratically elected president was aligned with the local version of reality. Hey, we should be able to make our own rules. We should be able to determine ourselves. And the key claim here is that those were both valid perspectives, but incomplete. They ignored relevant facts, and they prioritized interpretations that made them look good and feel good. And this is an interesting framing of datocracy. It's being in a context where we are forced to confront unpleasant facts about ourselves, your life code, accountability thing that you're always talking about. And the price we have to pay for that is essentially being as fully known as we are in the village. In the city, you can hide. You can hide in your own neighborhood. You can hide behind the law. You can hide behind poverty. But the cure for that is you need a place where when something is at stake, the people who have a stake in it cannot hide. They have to share all their facts, all their assumptions, all their interpretations for the world to see. And then there's a legitimate process where we say, it's not that we all agree on this, it's that all of us agree on this. And the bet that we make is that the people who are the most real, who pay the most attention to the reality, who have the best understanding of the interpretations, the wisdom of the crowds will converge on the optimal solution, not the perfect solution, but that the weight of public evidence will be like, look, we all see these same facts. We all understand that these interpretations work better than others, and we're just going to stand with that. And so the best case scenario is not that we have to choose between quarantining them and military action is that we can then pay a price commensurate with the depth of our belief. And we say, okay, we are just going to stop trading with those of you who insist on this thing. And we will be rigorously accountable to each other and ourselves. We'll make a binding commitment saying that we all agree that we will not trade with these people who are doing these horrible things because we believe that this interpretation, these values matter, and we will be held accountable to each other in the court of public opinion. And that gives us the thing that currently we lack, even among allies, is a way to make sure we're actually talking about the same thing and held accountable to that. So the in two paragraph in bullet points, what is the essence? What is the complete, actionable essence? This is the big idea, and I will stop my rant here, even though I've taken way more than 5 minutes. This is my distillation of what we've been talking about. Make events undeniable, enable parallel sense making, force visible alignment, let alignment drive action. And that's how we allow people to stay fully human within their tribes, but enable effective coordination and scale. And the key thing, we missed it out here, but to your point, Tom, the problem with defectors today is that defectors can act faster than communities can align. That's the claim. And if we can rapidly accelerate community coordination, then defectors get caught out quickly enough that either they're deterred from acting because they know it, or the people who care can quickly take visible, costly signals to deter defection that are legible in both directions.
Yeah, the defection should be impossible.
Defection is never impossible. It just becomes increasingly costly and short-lived.
Okay, we can have systems like, and I'm not saying implementing this, but in crypto you have multi-sig. That
right. You have
event.
You right. There's a trade-off, right, of the number of transactions you can process, the length of time the system can be out of state, and the number of actors you have to get to defect in order to make the system work, right? And yeah, so there's a lot of design patterns in crypto, and you kind of can tune your system. It'll never be perfect, but it bounds. There's two things. One, it'll bound. It becomes increasingly, you have to be increasingly clever and increasingly costly to defect longer. And, the thing I am most grateful for is that nobody in Silicon Valley has perfected longevity. So Trump will die. He will not be president forever, and he's probably not going to even make it to even try for another term. That is the most beautiful thing about the American system, is that nobody, including Trump himself, wants his son to be the heir and take over. And there's at least a chance. And that's actually the upside of the Iran war. The best case scenario from my perspective is that at the beginning of next year, both America and Iran have authentic democratic governments, because he's successfully destroyed both the illegitimate Iranian system and his own illegitimate system by his crazy ego-driven claim of supporting the protesters. And that would be beautiful if he actually gets rid of the worst of Iran and the worst of himself through his sheer arrogance. And maybe this is our window. Anyway, that I would stop ranting. I will stop ranting.
Yeah, and I hope you share those points,
I'll put them in the
Uh,
summary.
mhm.
Anyway, thank you, Ernest. Tom, what are you thinking and feeling?
Uh, it's interesting. I'd love to find a solution to the problem of people evading the pretty good mechanisms that were agreed in the UN and US.
Oh, well,
Uh,
I'll tell you, when you say pretty good, I would argue they were solving the wrong problem. That's why they failed.
okay, I'm listening.
Right. So the claim is, oh, we can always solve coordination problems by adding another layer of abstraction. Right. And what they forget, this is the personal journey I've been on for the last month of the Christian Lent calendar, is I always solve problems by stepping back and becoming more abstracted. And then I'm always shocked when real humans fail to act in accordance with my abstractions. And the way out, which is painful and horrifying, and I'm not saying I'm willing to do it, I'm just saying that this is the only way to solve the problem, is to give up the comfort and ease and certainty of abstraction and re-engage with the messy, visceral liveness of being human and actually engage. And the difference, and I'm still working this part out, is can I trust the system I've built around me, the AI, the bots, the documentation, the relationships, to hold the transcendent truths that I think are important so that I can be free to be fully present with people. And because right now, our leaders are valued precisely because we make them idealized abstractions who are decoupled from these things. We want Trump to not be religious, to not be obsessed about his family, to not be obsessed about it. The problem is that, well, then he doesn't care about anything and he's only obsessed with his own ego. That's actually, he's in that sense the most insane, perfect abstraction. He doesn't care about the system that gives him legitimacy. He really does. He has fully abstracted himself from any, like the funniest thing in the last, you know, 10 years of the Trump is all the liberal podcasts. I say, okay, maybe Trump is complying with the letter of law, but he's completely ignoring all precedent, all convention, all norms, all the things that make the system work. Whereas for the previous 50 years, they were complaining about being bound by precedent, custom, tradition, and value. Like, Ernest is like, the founding fathers, we need to revere what they built and not just sabotage it for our own whims. And like, this is the paradox. And we are blind to this. And that is the thing we have to see, is that we need thick norms and culture to care about anything at all. But we need to somehow not abstract it, but decouple it or maybe self-differentiate it to where we can say, yes, this is me, this is my identity. You are different than me. You have a different identity based on incompatible values. But Ernest's life code gives us a framework where where you are intelligible to me so that you know what I'm saying and I can trust you even though we don't share the same blood, ontology, metaphysics, language, literally language, is
Mhm.
that we can look at behavior and describe it objectively without needing to agree on common language. And that's what math started. And that is oh, one last thing, since I'm already messing with Ernest's world. I know you hate corporations. How do you feel about NGOs, Ernest?
Well, I can't say that I have studied them. I am aware of
But,
them.
but like things like the American Red Cross or the United Way, non-governmental organizations. Do you have any emotional feelings one way or the other? The United Nations, I guess, is technically a non-governmental organization.
I see their capabilities, but then I also see that they're broken.
Yeah,
Russia is part of the UN, and we're trying to see Russia as a as a normal nation, but obviously it is not. But the fact that it
Yeah.
can veto, the fact that it can veto things
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Right.
it
So
doesn't make sense.
but okay. The specifics, and maybe this is your point, is that you don't hate NGOs the way you hate corporations. You hate corporations because they're effective at doing what they want, and you despise NGOs because they're ineffective at doing what they want.
Well, I don't despise them. I say there should be they should have more teeth, or there should be logical, like example, UN. There shouldn't be entities that can veto stuff. Why is that? Why?
Well, I can tell you why. Because the alternative is that UN becomes a government that would be corrupted by the rich and powerful implicitly. And so rather than pretending that, you just put the rich and powerful on the Security Council. That literally is the reason for the design decision. Because if we had something where it was one nation, one vote, then you'd be like China, you just go around buying up all the votes because you don't have, and so they decided it's better to be honest about it, the corruption, rather than have it hide in the shadows.
Hmm.
And so
So it's
I can't,
systemic corruption. Wow.
because, well, the point is that if you don't have a shared model of reality, then whoever was the golden rule, he was the most golden, and the only cure for the golden rule is to have a neutral framework, which was inconceivable. This is before the internet, before anything, that we consider modern technology. It was barely, radio was barely, I guess radio was a thing, TV was not. Is like, well, the only way to get anybody to make any decisions is to stick them in a room together. And, if the rest of the room says yes, and the five most powerful nations say no, the whole system implodes. Right? And so there was no way, and there's still no way for the weak to hold the accountable, to have the power to force the rich to do anything. But the thing that we now have is that for all the poor, or maybe all the people who actually care about reality, that's the dream, to say, okay, I can't force you physically to do anything, but I can hold up a mirror that shows the world what you're really doing. And I'm willing to bet you're more afraid of reality than I am. And that is the power I have over you, is that I'm willing to embrace the reality that you're running away from. And I will stand strong enough to do. I mean, that's what martyrs have always done. The Gaza protesters, the Iranian protesters, the American revolutionaries, is that I believe in this reality enough to pledge my blood, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that's, to me, what made the American Revolution work, is that they found something bigger than themselves that they were willing to stand up for. And insanely against all odds, it proved stronger than the British Empire, the mightiest empire the world had up till that point. And it worked remarkably well for 200, almost 250 years. And that was insanely impressive by historical standards. But even enough to know the horrible compromises and self-deception, starting with slavery, that went into all of that. And this is the dream, is that now we can imagine, because we have better tools and technologies and relations and ways of communicating and connecting, to redesign something stronger. Anyway, Tom, I can send you my notes, but you have the link and you have your own AI. I propose a solution to the instant defector problem. It's probably shaky, if not wrong. I would love you to hammer on it and see if you and your AI can either solve it or break it, and post a comment or the rebuttal or clarification, and maybe we can discuss that next time.
I can have a go.
All right.
I'd see if there's any
Battle of the AIs.
solution to the problem.
And it's not the battle of the eyes. It's it is actually, I had my AI hammer on it until I came up with a solution that it thought was credible. It said, well, the first solution sucks. That's Act 3. And it's like, okay, I was wrong. Let me fix it. Okay, well, I think this works. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the thing that you find that breaks it will actually fix it. And it'll be anti-fragile, which would be even better. And but at least I passed the earnest sniff test and they didn't vomit all over it. So there's at least a chance that there's a there. All right. Thank you so much for indulging me. The bizarre thing, this was not a datocracy effort. This was trying to figure out our product strategy as our company, which is really about how do we build robust data systems that help us as a company make decisions better by leveraging all the modern tools and technologies. And that led me down this rabbit hole. So it's this may turn out to be not just my personal and professional and spiritual worlds colliding. So anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for this place to be seen, for this place to try to make each other intelligible and legible, for the passion that Ernest has brought and the enormous quantity of pain and documentation you have filtered through. Thank you, Tom. Ernest has been my right brain holding all the pain, and Tom has been my left brain forcing ever finer distinctions. And I am excited that, okay, this may be wrong, but I'm hoping it's at least intelligibly wrong and that you can help me to make it smarter. And then we can actually start building it in the rest of this year and start trying it out and I have an experiment that I built, which has gotten 3 different people to use it and have positive results. I can share that next time. But that's further than I've ever gotten, is having 3 people I asked them to use it and they used it enough that they spontaneously sent me the results this was really good and this is what happened. And it's oh, that's the first product market fit signal I've had in 11 years. So things are starting to shift, and maybe if I can get another, the way I know I'll have succeeded is if I have something concrete enough that Tom writes a book about it, and then it's compelling enough that Ernest reads the whole thing and writes the foreword. If I achieve that in my life, then I feel like I will have won the triple crown of Datocracy. And so that's my goal, is to come up with an idea good enough that Tom will write a book about it that Ernest will publicly endorse. And I think I can imagine failing my way there over the course of this year. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for the discussion.
Take care. Bye.
But